So let's do a little review of where we've come from. We're on week 4 of the 10 foundational meditations, and we're about to sort of get serious. We're supposed to really turn our attention to what this whole project is really about. We started off with learning how to use our concentration to practice concentration by moving our attention to an object, any object of experience in our world. But we mainly focused on resource, that is, objects that were peaceful, non-complicated, didn't have a lot of problems associated with them in our mind, in our heart. We wanted things that made us feel safe, that immediately gave us a reward of some kind of pleasure. This is a great way to build some peace into your life, to calm your nervous system. It's also a great way to build concentration, because relaxation and concentration go hand in hand. The more relaxed you get, the easier it is to concentrate. The deeper your concentration, the more relaxed you get. So much of what people think about as meditation, or at least what the ideal of meditation is really just in that first meditation. That's what people think meditate. The average person out there will think that's what meditation is. It's trying to get myself super calm. Now, we made it very clear that we're not trying to make ourselves any particular way. All you have to do is turn your attention to part of your life that is peaceful, and then as a consequence, you may get some of that peace as well. But it's really in service of the bigger project of meditation. It's the best way, the safest way for you to practice concentration, getting your concentration stronger, creating a container for more difficult work that might need to be done later spiritually, not just on the cushion, but in life. So if you have difficult stuff going on in your life, having a container, a safe container within which to deal with that difficult stuff is incredibly useful. So if you did nothing else in meditation, that would still be a very powerful meditation to work with. In the second week, we worked on acceptance, which is just a term of art. It's related to our normal concept of acceptance, to describe the attitude with which we concentrate. So in meditation, you see, when we play the piano or we do our taxes, or we build a brick wall, we might be concentrating, but we might not be meditating, because meditation requires this acceptance part. So the concentration is important, but the acceptance part, which is a attitude of letting things be as they are, of not trying to fix, judge, change, evaluate, interpret things, just trying to see it exactly as it is, as the most pure scientist would. And the only difference really between what the meditator is doing and what a scientist would be doing is that the scientist is trying to connect with the objective universe, but the meditator is literally looking directly at the subjective universe, right? What is their subjective experience exactly like? What is my experience like right now? If I get out of the way of interpreting it, judging it, or trying to figure out or try to fix it, what is it actually made of right this second? That's the quickest way to shortly wrap up what we did in week 2. So now we have 2 very powerful tools to start to look for the truth in our life. We have the ability to move our attention where we want to. That is, over time, we'll build that ability to concentrate, to look at something closely, not to look away before we really see the heart of it. And the second tool is the ability to start to turn off all the things, the biases, the desires, the belief systems that get in the way, the filters that get in the way of seeing what is actually right in front of us. So again, if you just did those first 2 meditations, you can get all the benefits of meditation without doing any of the further ones, because the other ones will sort of happen automatically if you work on it. But we can speed it up by focusing, right, by pointing out where we might want to go. So the third week we did focus out. It's really a type of resource meditation. So it's really just part of the first meditation in a way, but it's a specific and very useful one. It's useful for two reasons. One, because we can use it in everyday life. A lot of people get very good at meditation, meaning they'll sit down and they will get good at concentrating, get good at experiencing a deep state of relaxation and calm, get good at having a moment of clarity. And that will help them in the rest of their day. It's cleansing their mind. It's washing them free from stuff for a little while. It's a benefit. Of course it is. But then I've had many students come to me that have been meditating for years, and they'll say something like, okay, so I'm really good at this meditating, but how do I bring that into my everyday life, right? And focus out is really a good example, most of mindfulness, but focus out is a really great practice that you can do all day long. I can do it right now. I can be like, see, hear. I can be doing that even as I'm talking to you because I've been doing it for years. But so it's a practice you can bring into your everyday life. But the second reason the focus out is so useful is because it starts to build a very simple conceptual sensory structure for us to be able to see everything that happens in our life. So I'll just make a claim right now. I might have made it last week, but anything you can experience is going to be sensory. So another way of saying that is everything in your life that's out there, that's in your experience field, is going to be see, hear, or feel, or taste, or touch. Or if you thought there were some other senses, that'd be fine too. But mainly see, hear, or feel. Everything. Once we've gotten very good at learning to sort of label things, see, hear, feel, learning to stay awake to the fact that this is not a microphone. This is a sensory experience of black colors and shapes, right? This is not a bus. This is a high-pitched kind of like whir, right? That allows us to deconstruct our experience, which is not the point of meditation, but is a very useful practice as part of meditation. Being able to deconstruct our experience allows us to get down to the bottom of the ladder. Rather than living up in the fully formed movie of our life, the narrative reality we live in, our normal ego structure, we can deconstruct that and see what our life really is made of. It's made of all these sensory experiences. And when we can do that, we can free ourselves from our story of everything. And we'll can come back to narrative reality sort of refreshed, and maybe some of the story is no longer there. But when we do focus out, we do it mainly because it's a resource. That's why I say when in doubt, focus out. When you're having a struggle in life, focus out. Because most of that stuff isn't a problem. Most of the focus out is pretty fine. It's okay, right? There's just an infinite number of things I can look around right now, and they're all fine. They're fine. They're not a problem. I don't pay attention to them because they're not a problem. My mind won't pay. So when we practice, I can start paying attention to all these not problems in my life. Oh my gosh, there's no problems all over the place, right? Now our mind is going to go, there's a problem over in this one place, right? But you go, well, but look, no problem. Look, no problem, right? So that's why focus out is so powerful as a resource. But if when we look out, we don't find any problems, where are the problems? The problems are in. The creation of problem is in our minds and emotions, our mind heart, as it would be said in the East. But, and this is the essential piece, our mind appears in our consciousness in the same way that everything out in the world appears in our consciousness as a sensory experience. We hear our mind, and we see our mind, and we feel our feelings. It's a sound in our head, doesn't go in our ears, it just starts in the brain. That's the only difference, though. It's experienced. In experience, there's no difference. It's a sound, or it's a picture, an imagined picture, something we're picturing, or it's a feeling. We're going to focus on mind today. So just the pictures and sounds that we experience in our head. But this is incredibly essential. Most of us think we are our thoughts, that the thoughts that we're listening to in our head, we think we're the ones saying those thoughts to ourselves. I got to go pick up some milk. Who's saying that? We think we're saying that to ourselves. Oh, you suck. We think we're telling ourselves that we suck, right? You need to do better. This is never going to end. Whatever it is, we think we're the one telling ourselves that. This is one way of putting this is what we call identification. We identify with our thoughts. We think we are the thought. Now, we can identify with external objects. Say I have a really nice watch that my father gave me. I want to quote the Tarantino movie that was delivered to me from Vietnam, right? On his deathbed, right? Okay, so, and we identify with that object, right? We can be like someone takes this object, I feel like part of me was taken away. So we can identify with external things, but mostly we identify with our thoughts and feelings. One of the projects of meditation is to see what we really are. So if we're on the practice of accepting, that's really what meditation is going to be about, is seeing the reality of things, the truth with a capital T. The fundamental question we want to see the truth of is, who are we? Who am I? Now, you may have heard this question. If you've done spirituality for a while, you may have heard it, and it may sort of not feel that powerful anymore. But it's nonetheless one way of thinking about what we're doing. Another way of saying is, what are we? Or just what is the universe even? What is reality, right? So that ladder is going all the way down to reality with a capital R. But we have to go through our sense of self, because our self is the thing we identify with. And so it gets in the way of seeing, it's the thing that puts the filter over everything. Okay, so, but if our thoughts are just sounds in the head, we're going to see pretty quickly that they are not who we actually are, because we will be observing those sounds and we will be the observer of those sounds. So we can't be those sounds. We're the observer of the sounds. And just as we practice in acceptance, right? Letting the breath, waiting, remember that? Waiting for the breath to come in. Oh, the breath comes in on its own. Oh, the breath breathes out on its own. Yes, I can feel like I start to control it, but if I just get out of the way, the breath will do its thing without any effort. Just like that, the mind will mind without any interference from you. And you'll start to watch that the mind will just keep going, even without you identifying with it. And so that's the simple practice when we start to focus on mind. Now, one reason this is such a jump, this is a shift in our practice when we start to do this. You don't have to make this your main practice. You should try it a little bit so that when you're doing the other practices, you're better at catching yourself when you go into mind, right? So even if you don't make focus on mind your main practice, and I wouldn't say that's a great place to start for most people. You'd want to start with, as I said, with the resource stuff, or focus out, or some other resource. But by doing some work to familiarize yourself with how your mind is actually being created, it allows you to be more vigilant in a way of catching yourself getting distracted by your mind. So you may think, I'm really focused on breath, but you're not aware, you're not awake to the fact that your mind is going, I'm doing a good job focused on the breath is great, and your mind is going along and you just think that's who you are, and you're not aware that you're actually been distracted from the breath and are in your mind's ideas of the breath. So we start to attend to mind a little bit to become familiar with how we are generating our experience. It's, yes, partly made by external sensory information coming in, but it's mostly made by internal sensory information laying over that picture of the world. So at first we think of meditation as this, we're trying to concentrate on this, and then our mind and our feelings and our stories and our memories and our hopes and dreams, they distract us, right? Or some other sensory thing distracts us, and we have to bring our mind back. That's concentration. And that is what concentration is. That's a big chunk of it. But as we start to focus on mind, we realize that there's a second piece of concentration, and that's the ability to not lose yourself in your mind. So it's not just that you're being distracted from. So even if you're focused on your mind, right? Your object of meditation is your mind. You will not be meditating if you're just lost in the mind. If you're just daydreaming and you've forgotten what you're doing, you will not be concentrating anymore. Even though you're still focused on the mind, you're focused on the mind from within the mind. You're lost inside of it. Does that make sense? The difference between hearing your mind and knowing that it's a sound and being awake to just thinking, which we do all day long, is massive but subtle. And that's why this becomes this reveals more about what it is to be awake when we start to focus in, as we'll call it. Focusing on mind and emotions is focusing in. Okay, so the mind presents in it presents in all the senses. Let's put it that way first. You can imagine a full meal, right? You can imagine, most of us can imagine the smell, imagine the taste, imagine the sounds of the restaurant, imagine the images of the restaurant, imagine the feel of the air conditioning on our face, right? We can imagine, our mind can generate all the senses. And so really, I will talk about the mind as see and hear, or talk and see, right? Mental talk is the main sound, right? And then so it's really mental talk, which is the linguistic narrative mind. It's a very specific part of the human brain that lots of animals don't have, and no animal has to our degree of development, as far as we know. And then there's the imaginative mind, which I think most animals do have. And that imaginative mind will mainly focus on it as see, because that's that's our most powerful sense, and that's how most of our imaginative mind works for most of us. But that imaginative mind can also have the other senses in it. Like I said, we can imagine being on a beach, and we put all the senses there, and that's the imagined mind. We'll call that see most of the time. But if you wanted to, you could use other labels like see, hear, when you hear the water splashing on the beach or something. But so for now, see and hear. So let's talk about the talk mind. We're going to actually do exercises before we sit today. So most of you heard me use this phrase. In Narnia, there is a lion, I say. So now I want you to say that in your head. Did you hear that? Right? How do you know you're saying it in your head? It's a very important exercise. I have to say that there's a bunch of science that there are people who have no internal, mental talk and who have no internal mental image. And I'm not going to deny the science, but I've not met these people. So I'm just going to say I keep teaching the way I teach, because when I give the right instructions, people are like, oh yeah, there's something there. So it may sound different. It's not like a sound in your ear, of course, but you know it's happening. And the way you know it's happening is you're listening to it internally. In Narnia, there is a lion. Here's how you can check. If you don't think you can hear it, say it in a high-pitched Mickey Mouse voice. In Narnia, there is a lion. Right now, do it in your head. You can hear that, right? You can hear there's a difference between the two. You didn't open your mouth. You didn't have to say anything. You heard it in there. So our mind that talks to us all day long, that says, you got to do this, you got to do that, you're no good at this, that person's great, whatever, that is sounds in your head. Now, we've already worked with sounds, so we know how to work with sound. We did this last week. How do we work with sound? We focus in on the sensory detail of sound. We focus on the pitch, whether it's high or low, like we just did. High or low, sorry, there we go. Mickey Mouse or Barry White, right? Those are two opposites on a scale, I guess. And we focus on the loudness or softness. Some people always come to me and they'll say, my mind is so loud. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. That's a good description, actually. It's just a sound in your head. It's like construction outside. It can be loud. Or my mind, or it's like, I can barely hear my mind. That'll happen too. It's like your mind gets very quiet. It can be very powerful and quiet. Sometimes it's very insidious, the quiet mind. Not the perfectly quiet mind, but the whispering. Right? So loud or soft. It can have a rhythm to it. It starts and stops. You can hear it when it stops. It also has a location, and this is kind of key for right now, because for some of us, for most of us, this is a new activity trying to focus on a sound that is not really outside, but inside. So it's important to notice that when you say, in Narnia there is a lion, that it seems to come from a location for most of us in our head somewhere. So try that. So just yourself say right now, where is that? Where did you hear that voice? For me, it's right in the middle brain here, sort of just in front of the ears and in my brain. That's the place you will focus on when you decide to meditate on talk, on mental talk. For you. Now, it doesn't mean that's the only place you'll hear things. In fact, as you meditate, you'll probably start to hear a second voice that's further back from that. That's pretty common, but that's where you'll start. And just like with the breath, where at first it's hard, like I got to focus on my breath. I got to keep bringing my face back to my belly. You'll do the same thing. You'll use the location as a way of bringing your attention back to that location and then listening to what arises there. Sometimes, for many of us, when we first start to do this, the mind goes kind of quiet, like a cockroach skittering away when you turn the lights on. And that's fine. Just enjoy the quiet mind if that's the experience you have. Don't make it a problem, right? Don't worry, your mind will come back. Another really important thing to be able to notice here, so many people say, I can't stop my mind, which is, let's just be really clear, that is not the goal of meditation. We're not trying to stop our mind. We're not trying to quiet our mind. We're not trying, remember, acceptance. That's what we're working on. So we're not trying to make our mind do anything. We're trying to see what our mind is like. But when you pay attention to your mind, you will notice that the mind stops itself. If it's a sentence, it's got to end at some point. It may just be a little moment, a little gap, right? But there are little gaps all through your thinking where there isn't any sound happening. And that's really useful to notice. Later on, when you get more advanced, you can spend time in the gaps, and then you will have an experience of quiet mind. for free without even having to do anything. It's just there already, right? You'll then start to notice that the mind is arising in a silent space. And you'll see the quiet that's all around the sounds in the mind. And that's all that matters. That's all that really matters to connect with, is that silence is always here no matter what noise our mind is making. But that's farther down the road, but you can see already, even with a little bit of, just with a little bit of instruction, how that might be possible. So a second thing you have to be aware of with the focus on mind is that we are so identified with our mental talk. We almost don't think we can live without our mental talk. That as you're meditating on your mental talk, and you'll notice it, and you'll be like, and then you'll go, oh, I'm doing a great job, or oh, this is hard, or oh, I caught it, oh, I lost it. There'll be this other mental talk that is about the meditation, and you won't notice that mental talk. Why? Because you're identified with that mental talk. So you'll just think that's you doing the meditation, when really that's just more sounds in your head in a different spot that have sort of tricked you into missing them. So that's the next little step. As you do this, you'll start to want to notice all the mental talk. So when you focus on mental talk, you'll want to notice when you start to jump to a different location so the mental talk, so you can still feel safe and comfortable in the fact that I am still this talker. We are very addicted to being the mental talk. So it actually feels a little uncomfortable for most of us at first to be observing the talk as opposed to being the talker. So you keep doing that process. You keep jumping back. You keep noticing until you've disentangled yourself from the sounds in your head. I'm giving you all the instructions, but as you start, it's just listening to sounds in your head. But you can see how incredibly deep and powerful this practice might be. Can you see that already? We're going right into the heart of how our world is created. So the second part of how our world is created is we generate a model of the world. And I can show you this we close our eyes. Close our eyes. And now, where is the door to your room? Your eyes are closed. You know where it is, right? You could answer the question, but can you even point to it? Like I can point to the door in my room. Okay. Can you see it in your mind, right? You're sort of picturing where the door is, right? If you picture yourself walking over to the door, can you see the things you have to go around right? This is with your eyes closed. When your eyes are closed, the whole room is still there. You don't suddenly think you're in Antarctica. Your eyes are closed, but you know exactly where you are. This is the other way our mind creates our world. Even with our eyes closed, our mind is generating a picture of the world. And it's keeping that updated all the time, microsecond by microsecond. It's updating that model of the world. That model of the world includes that visual world. It includes also your old sense of yourself, your feelings, whether you're good or bad, all that too. That's all in there as well. But it's all included in the mind, generated by the mind, I should say. So how do we construct our world? Well, we saw part of it's through the talk. There's this narration that tells us what we're doing, when we're doing it, what we should do next, what's good and what's bad. It's constantly telling us that. It's just an exhausting kind of like type A, almost like teacher's pet that's just got to answer all the questions, right? You can't, just got to tell us something good about it. It's like, that door is good, that thing is good, that's bad, right? It's just constantly, that's the mind, that's the talk mind, how that creates our world, our experience. But there's also the see mind that's constantly generating a model of how the world looks. And it's also generating a model of what we hope the world will look like in the future, and a model of what the world was like in the past, right? Memories, that's always happening. It's also just pure imagination starts to happen. Okay, so where do we look for that? So we close our eyes again, and now I'll ask you again, there's some people who say they don't see any mental images, and that's fine. If you really don't see any mental images, you'll just focus on the back of the eyelids and the shapes there. Your eyes are still working, and unless you're in a pitch black room, you will start to see shapes and patterns there that you can just focus on when you want to focus on see. But for most of us, I can ask you to picture a lion in Narnia, right? Or you can close your eyes and picture my face, right? Picture your mother's face. Now, no, it's not a high definition 4K perfect photographic representation. It's actually more rich than that, but you can see the face, right? Or if that's too complex, if right now you can say, can you imagine an orange? Okay. So again, you'll want to notice the location that appears to happen. Most of it, it's almost like there's a screen behind our forehead, and that's sort of where we see our images for most of us, but it's for you, you want to notice, where does it seem like I'm looking when I imagine Lake Titicaca, right? Like I went there once and on a trip, and I can still remember us pushing the boats off from shore, right? And I can picture the water, and it's all right out here. It's all right around the eyes, blah, blah, for me. And we already know how to work with see and visual information. We just focus on color, light and dark, edges, shapes, locations, movement, flow. I forgot to mention flow with sound. That's an obvious one, but sound is constantly flowing, so we notice rhythms and sound. The same thing here. Are the images moving fast? Are they moving from there to there? Are they moving staccato? Are they appearing and disappearing? Images will, the thing about our visual mind is it's not always constant. It might appear and disappear. We might see the Lake Titicaca one moment, and then we might see, the New York Knicks playing basketball the next. But we're just there for the movie, and we're trying not to get lost in it. So we're practicing acceptance. So maybe I remember my trip to Peru, and I'm on the lake, and our normal day was like, oh, I'm going to remember that, right? I'm going to go into that. Remember when it was that and this and that. And that's not meditating. That's remembering. You'll just sit there and wait, and you'll see. Maybe it'll play out more of your memories from that, or maybe it'll just move on to something else. Well, we aren't getting lost in it. We're just accepting. It's giving us a slideshow, and it gets to decide what slides it shows us. What do I mean by it? Well, I don't know. Our subconscious, our unconscious, the universe, however you want to put it. Close our eyes, and we're going to watch the movie it's going to show us. And again, if you don't see anything, you just focus on the blank behind the eyelids, and you enjoy that. That's a quiet mind. Now, at the deepest level, just as I talked about mental talk, at the deepest level of focusing on this part of the mind, on the see part of mind, we will start to see how our mind is creating our model of the world, which I just talked about. With our eyes closed, we'll see that our mind is constantly generating a picture of our body. Like you can see your face with your eyes closed. It's weird, right? Your face is here, and you're looking this way, but you can sort of see your face, and you can see your hands. I'm moving my hands around. I can see them, right? This is a deeper kind of, it's a more difficult practice because we're so identified with that model. So that's a place that's hard to truly disidentify from. So you have to practice for a while until that becomes available. So first, we just want to sort of focus on the imagined pictures that we see in our mind's eye. There's also a source of a lot of our creativity. If you can really get out of the way and start to let these images play, you're actually accessing your creative source. Rather than immediately judging what's happening or getting lost in what's happening, you get out of the way and you just let it generate whatever it wants. That's opening the doorway to your creativity. That's true with the mental talk, but it's more true of this part, because this part is an older part of our soul, our older part of our evolutionary heritage, this imagined model of the world, this thing that generates the things we've seen and heard, right? And generates new possibilities. And so when we open that door, we open the door to creativity. That's where we get all our creative ideas. So it's a useful practice for that. So that is what we'll call mind. These are all just categories. They're not necessarily the true categories or the right way, the scientific way to think. This is a way that is useful to carve up your experience so that you can get a handle on it. Get a sense of how your experience is being created. Get a sense of how your life is being generated, right? Get a sense of how you're generating your problems, your narrative, your story, your movie. And this is a big shift in your practice when you start to be awake to this way of meditating. In fact, I want to just finish with that. What is the myth everyone says about meditation? You got to sit with a quiet mind, right? No, I'm telling you, it's the opposite. The mind can be your focus, right? See how different that is from the everyday person's understanding of what meditation is? The mind can be the object of your meditation. So you don't have to focus on candles and you know, beautiful flowers and breath. You can focus on your mind itself. And that is why mindfulness is so powerful. Nothing is rejected by mindfulness. Every aspect of yourself is open for examination, observation, acceptance. Every part of yourself. And if there's some part of yourself that doesn't fit the categories I've talked about, the only one I haven't had a class on is your emotional feeling in the body. That's the last category. If something part of you think that doesn't fit that, then fine, just add that as a new thing to focus on. That's totally allowed, right? You don't have to follow my categories. Like Matt has a lot of synesthesia. There might be a way that he would want to organize his internal experience that's different than what I'm doing. Or there, you may see a color I don't know. It doesn't matter. You can focus on that, right? Like it doesn't matter. What you want to be able to do is say, is there some part of my experience that I have not allowed to be brought into my meditative practice? Then you'll bring it in. And the categories I'm giving you for most human beings that I've met will be able to encompass the entirety of your experience. This is amazing. There's a side of us that finds it depressing. Everything in your life is just see, hear, feel. But there's another side of you that will realize that it's completely freeing. All your problems are just a sound or a color or a vibration. When you stop thinking of them as problems and you start thinking of them as just sensory experiences, your relationship to them changes. Now, there are a couple feels like pain or nausea that are so core biological to us as challenging that those can be more difficult. It still can change your relationship to those, but those are a little bit more difficult. But 99% of our suffering is not about stuff like that. Even when we do have a physical pain, most of our suffering with respect to that pain is about our fear and all other stuff about it, right? So we'll realize that most of our problems, all of our problems, but 99.9% of our problems are it's easy to see that they are generated by sounds, feels, and pictures. Okay, so let's meditate.